Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my sports podcast where I, Pio Solon, ask questions to notable sports personalities about sports development, sports performance, health, fitness, and everything under the sun of sports. Joining me today is one of the giants and the leaders in Philippine sports. As Winston Churchill once said, study history, study history. In history lies all the secrets of statecraft. And I guess that maxim applies to sports development. To introduce my guest, just a simple background. He's a former president of the Philippine Olympic Committee. He was the governor of Ilocos Norte, currently the mayor of Lawag. But those in the world of Philippine sport know him as the director of the Project Gintong Alay program, which was the golden projects for Philippine sports. Mr. Michael Keon, good afternoon to you, sir, and thank you for coming.
Good afternoon, Pio, and thank you for having me on your podcast. I've not talked about sport in a very long time. I've been busy dealing with the pandemic dito sa Lawag and other issues as the Amati Ciudad, as the mayor of Lawag. So sports has been quite far from me for a while.
Right, but I reckon, sir, that your love for sport has always been present.
Of course, and in fact, after this podcast, I'll go for a run.
How old are you now, sir?
I'm 67.
You're looking as fit as ever, and we only hope to be as fit as you are.
Well, I can still, if I'm pressured, I can still run a 10K, but I'll go and run a 5K on the treadmill. Sometimes I'll run outside on the road, but I have a good treadmill, so I'll just run on the treadmill.
Right. So I just want to get kick off, some questions, and I wanted to entitle this podcast "The Past, the Present, and the Future of Philippine Sport." And I think it's important to look forward, but also be mindful of everything that went on in the past. And I'd like to ask you, how was Gintong Alay initiated?
Gintong Alay was created on October 31, 1979 through letter of instruction number 955. And Gintong Alay, I studied in UP Pio. I studied in UP when I came back from Australia. Right. And I actually created the second running club, Buong Filipinas. The first registered running club was the Makati Roadrunners Club. Right. The second registered running club was the UP Roadrunners Club. And I created that. And on weekends, Patafa would hold cross-country meets during the summer. And I didn't appreciate the way they conducted cross-country meets, nor did the other participants. I mean, they held it around noontime at the hottest time of the day, and it was actually run very badly. So I felt, and my friends at the time felt, that because of my connection to the APO, to the president at that time, it would be a good idea to perhaps approach him about putting together a running program for runners. So initially, Gintong Alay was simply a running program for distance runners. And we relocated it in Baguio City. However, after a short time, we decided to expand it to include track and field. Right. Am I okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
To make it track and field. And then because of the initial success of track and field, within 6 months, I don't know if you remember our star athlete, Lydia de Vega.
Yes.
Who is the spring queen of Asia, who won double gold medals at the Asian Games. She, within 6 months of beginning the Gintong Alay program, she broke both the Asian Games, Southeast Asian Games, and Philippine record for the 400 meters.
Right.
And she was only 16. at the time. And we subsequently broke a whole lot of records with another runner by the name of Isidro del Prado, who was our 400, 800 meter runner. And because of that, the president was so impressed that he expanded the scope of Gintong Alay, and we ended up taking over from the Ministry of Youth and Sports Development and running buong sport dito sa Filipinas.
Right.
And that coincided with me becoming also the president of the Philippine Olympic Committee. So that's more or less how Gintong Alay became.
How many athletes are at the peak of Gintong Alay? How many athletes were you overseeing at this time?
Well, at that time, there weren't as many NSAs as there are now. There was approximately mga 30 NSAs at that time. Of course, all the premier sports like track and field, swimming, all the martial arts, etc. I don't know, maybe at that time we were training more between 1,000 to 1,500 athletes of all the NSAs put together at that time.
So roughly the same number currently, I guess, under PSC, no?
Well, I think there would be more now because there's a lot more NSAs and there's a lot more sports. Also in Baguio, we didn't only have track and field, we also had boxing. So later on, we also brought, and to this day, the boxers still train in the training that I created in teachers in Baguio.
Yeah. During this time, how did we compare to the best countries in Asia in sports, roughly?
Well, Pio, when I took over in 79, we eventually hosted the Southeast Asian Games in Manila in 1981. Asia Games. 2 years later in Singapore, we placed second. Okay, and that was a surprise to all of us that we were able to place second, not on home soil but overseas.
Yeah.
Okay. Now after that, I was subjected to politics. You know, there's always politics in this country, and certain things occurred, and we simply repeated our third place performance. So we were third, second, and third. So Gintong Alay was October 79 hanggang EDSA in 86. Yeah. Okay, so within that period of time, we also captured gold medals in the Asian Games. We were actually becoming quite strong in track and field, and this was always my issue that I tend to harp about the past, about the two athletes, about Lydia de Vega and Isidro del Prado, were actually capable of winning medals in the Olympics. Even Lydia was capable of winning gold medals. But you know, the problem in the Philippines, there's too much politics. Okay, so even under the rule of President Marcos, you know, you can term it an authoritarian government, whatever you like. But even during his time, there was politics. And this politics compromised our training program. And this is why you know, this is more a function of the cultura, of the culture of the Filipino, and how we tend to inject politics into everything that we do. Okay. And sports is the last sphere of life in which you need politics. Okay. Because you compromise training, you compromise discipline, you compromise long-term consistency, which are all factors in sports excellence.
Yeah, I tell a lot of people the difference with sport and a lot of maybe, let's say, tourism is that with, you know, tourism, the guy from the street will not know how to develop a tourism program. But with sports, the guy on the street will have an opinion.
Yes.
And he will voice out that opinion really strongly about sport, no matter if, you know, he doesn't know anything about it.
Yes. Well, it's something that we all do one way or the other. Okay, we all work out in various ways. We all play various games. You know, sports is an integral part of society.
Like you said, sir, the structure was there, the support was there. With regards to infrastructure, what projects were made to develop the sports infrastructure in the country during this time?
Well, Well, we fixed up Rizal Memorial. Okay. I actually, Pio, I was actually formerly the UAAP champion in 5,000 meters. When I was studying in UP, I ran and I was the UAAP champion. And when I ran, it was a dirt track. So when Gintong Alay was created, we built a track, a synthetic track at Rizal. We built one at Ultra, and then we of course built our track in Baguio. So I built 3 synthetic tracks at that time. And Ultra was fixed up as a sports complex. The Baguio training camp was specifically just track and field and boxing. To tell you and then of course Rizal Memorial was fixed up for the hosting of the 81 Southeast Asian Games. To tell you the truth, Pio, there wasn't so much concentration on infrastructure at that time. It was more to do with training per se. That we have tremendous talent. We don't really need to have, sorry to say, we don't need to have Phil American, Phil British, Phil Australian, Phil this, Phil that. Okay. Yeah. At the time of Gintong Alay, we had such good local athletes. Just because of being a former track athlete myself, I'm very familiar with track and field. Our 4x400 meter team still has the record to this day. Okay, the record is 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 seconds, and I think 3:5:75 seconds, okay, which is a very, very fast time. And actually at the time when it was set in 1985 in the Bangkok Olympics, it would have gotten you into the quarterfinals or maybe into the finals of the Olympics with a very slow time. Okay, but you could, that's how fast we were. And this was all local talent. Unlike nowadays that we use foreign Filipinos, okay, for want of a better word. Okay, and talent scouting is so important. You have the DepEd having competitions on the provincial level, regional level, then you have the Palarong Pambansan on the national level. I saw when I was running sports in Ilocos Norte, not when I was Gintong Alay, because after returning back from overseas, I later came to Ilocos Norte and I put together a downsized version of Gintong Alay. This made me travel all around the country, which is something I wasn't able to do in Gintong Alay because I was on the national level. And I saw so much local talent. And this local talent falls by the wayside. Kasi wala nang sistema when it comes, I mean, they say that there's a talent selection system in the PSC. That's just a nice term, okay? The problem when it comes to selection of athletes, there's too much politics when it comes to selection of athletes. And this is sayang because, you know, Pio, we have so much talent in the Philippines. That's one. We have the talent. As long as you have the infrastructure, you then have to have proper training. And at that time, I brought in foreign coaches. I brought in foreign coaches in various sports. And these coaches were good because we ensured that we got very good coaches. And I had a very good coach in track and field. I had an Australian coach. Imagine we had American coaches, Australian coaches. We even brought in Russian coaches. We even had Russian coaches for the jumps, for the high jumps, the long jump, because the Russians at that time had the world record for the high jump. So just using track and field, also with boxing, we brought in foreign coaches. So as long as you have good coaching, the local talent will suffice because local talent is so good. It's just that the local talent needs to be trained properly. It needs to have the best infrastructure. The athletes need to have the best equipment, and the athletes need to be able to train consistently. And to build up world-class champions, you have to train people consistently over a long period of time, just like what happened to Heidelin Diaz.
Yes.
And that's why we're able to win the first Olympic gold medal. Now, as long as you have those ingredients, you will inevitably have success. What you have to do is minimize politics. You minimize politics, you have all these other ingredients. You know, we can really build up the Philippines as a powerhouse in sport. I mean, we used to dominate. That's why in track and field, imagine Pio, when we went to the Asian Track and Field Championships, we won a lot of gold medals.
Right.
And that's the Asian Track and Field Championships,
Yeah.
Okay. And that's not happening anymore.
Right.
In track and field, you only have Obiena in the Povo, okay, but who's doing very well, and he's local. In fact, I know Obiena even from before, okay? Yes. So Obiena is really good, but where are all the runners?
Right.
Wala pa. There are no runners anymore. Do you know why, Pio? Because they don't train in Baguio anymore. And the reason why we trained in Baguio is because it's relatively high altitude, so it's relatively cool, okay? Siyempre, lowland Filipinas is too hot. It's too hot.
Yeah, you can't get the juice out.
You. How can you get people to train for the marathon in the Philippines
in the humidity,
the type of climate that we have? It's mahirap. So what we did was we trained the athletes in Baguio, and in fact, many of our top runners came from the mountain provinces. Came from the Cordilleras, came from Bengues, okay, because of the high altitude. And this is why the Ethiopians and the Kenyans are so good, because they grow up and train at high altitude.
What type of the support did the athletes receive from the Gintong Alay project? Because I remember anybody who came from Gintong Alay would say, we miss the good old days of the Gintong Alay. And it appears that it's just not happening now. But what was the type of support these athletes were getting during this time, sir?
Well, in training, we always made sure that people were well fed, and we always made sure that people had vitamin supplementation, because vitamin supplementation is a key part of your training, okay? And people need to eat well. Food is fuel. Okay, so we concentrated on ensuring that athletes ate well, that athletes had vitamin supplementation, that athletes receive per dime. When we brought all of our athletes to Baguio, we cross-enrolled them in schools in Baguio, so everyone would study. In fact, people don't realize that during those times in the 80s, all of our athletes were studying. In track and field, they all studied in Baguio. They just didn't sit around. So they trained in the morning, they studied all day, then they trained in the afternoon. Right. Okay. And now that was just for track and field. For other sports in different areas, also boxing. You know, Pio, I was also the president of the Amateur Boxing Association of the Philippines. Yes. I was the president of ABAP, not just the president of PATAFA. And I had an interest in boxing myself because, for your information, I grew up in Thailand. I grew up in Thailand. A portion of my life, I grew up in Bangkok, Thailand, and I got into Thai boxing. Right. And my son, my namesake Michael, who lives in Australia, is a Thai boxer. He does Muay Thai. Okay, and he even goes to Thailand and trains in Thailand. So I have an attraction to boxing. Okay,
I've been to the facility there.
Excuse me?
I've been to that facility in Baguio, sir. Maybe 2010, 2009. So
okay.
Amazing.
I don't know if it's still the same now. I have no idea. I haven't, I don't really deal with sport at this time. Sorry to say.
Well, who knows? You spoke about the coaches, or you're bringing in foreign talents for coaching. What ways were there? Were there any possibilities for the transfer of, the skills and the knowledge and the know-how our local coaches? Was this a plan?
Absolutely, absolutely. The foreign coaches did not train in a vacuum. The foreign coaches trained our local coaches. The foreign coaches always had our local coaches with them,
Right.
studying their way of training, absorbing their training technique. We always did that. And that's why, you know, because of the fact that I was a former athlete, and Pio, you have to understand, in track and field, I actually brought to the Philippines my former coach in Australia, whose name was Tony Benson. I took up running in Australia when I was in boarding school. I was in boarding school in the Christian Brothers St. Patrick's College in a city called Ballarat, which is about nearly 100 miles outside Melbourne. I studied there under the Christian Brothers, and being a boarder, I was held in the school, and I couldn't stand it. So my way of getting out of school was to go for a run.
Right.
And in Ballarat has a man-made lake called Lake Windaree, which is exactly 4 miles in circumference, and it's where the 1956 rowing competition was held for the 1956 Melbourne Olympics. And what we would do, what all the athletes in the different schools, they would run around the lake. The lake became the training ground. And I would literally go and run around the lake every day. And that's how I took up distance running. My coach at that time was my science teacher. His name was Tony Benson. He was Pan Pacific gold medalist in 1,500 meters, Australian record holder in 1,500 and 3,000 meters. He went on to compete in the 1972 Olympics in the 5,000 meters. He was a very good runner. He was a sub 4-minute miler. I brought him to the Philippines, and he was a very, very good coach. And it shows. It shows in Lydia de Vega and Isidro del Prado. And even to this day, Pio, we have the 3,000 meter steeplechase record. And we're talking about more than 30 years that it hasn't even been broken, which is not a good reflection of the current training program, because records are meant to be broken.
Right.
So not to be unbroken for more than 30 years.
From Gintong Alay, sir, where did we begin to lose the plot?
Well, after EDSA, you know, we tended to stagnate and go around in circles. Okay. However, during the time of President Fidel Ramos, I believe it was 91, the Philippines hosted the games and only lost by 1 gold medal.
Right.
I believe at that time, but the Philippines lost. And so, but that was a continuation of Gintong Alay. That's what everyone said. So between 86 to 91, there were still so many athletes who had been built up by Gintong Alay who were still medyo malakas.
Yes.
Okay. So, but then after that, that's when everything started to go downhill. And that's when we started to place 5th place, 6th place like that, no? And that, and I think, Pio, you know that I returned in 2005 as the national training director.
Yes, for the Manila Sea Games.
Yes, and where we came first.
Right, yes.
For the first time. And that's, and of course, when we hosted the SEA Games last time, we were also champions, diba?
Yes, sir.
So, Pio, we fluctuate. In Philippine sports, we fluctuate, okay? We go up and down, up and down. And, you know, it's just like Philippine politics. We go up and down, okay? It's the cultura, okay? And sayang, because, you know, we really have the capacity to really become a sports power. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying. There really isn't enough long-term continuity. But I believe that with boxing, for example, you saw the fact that we won 1 silver and 2 bronze medals.
Yes.
And that performance was good. Okay.
It's a well-managed program.
Boxing, yes.
Yes.
Because it has an Australian coach.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, yes, we went up and then sports went sort of fluctuated, but then it remained up in 91. Then it went down for a long time and then it went back up. And the fact that it fluctuates so much shows you that Philippine sports does not have the proper underpinnings. It doesn't have the proper foundation because it should never be based on personality. You should have a foundation already that goes beyond whoever is in charge of Philippine sport.
Right.
If you create a proper foundation, then it's not how good the president of the Olympic Committee is. It's not how good the head of the Philippine Sports Commission is. It's the system. You have to create a proper system, and that's where we fail.
Right. And you were talking about all the politics in sport. I'd like to get your take. Well, I know you're the president of the POC, but right now there have been years where the PSC and the POC do not get along, and this compounded by the fact that you have NSAs who are errant in their duties and responsibilities. What's your take on that, sir?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really ironic that I ended up by, virtually. I mean, I was the youngest president of an Olympic committee, of a National Olympic Committee, buong mundo, when I became the president of the Philippine Olympic Committee at the age of 27. I was later surpassed by the Crown Prince of Qatar, who became his president of the Qatari Olympic Committee at the age of 25. But anyway, so I was the president of the POC, I was the head of PATAFA, the head of ABAP, and the executive director of Gintong Alay. So I virtually controlled both the governmental side of sports and the NGO side of sports.
Right.
At that time, being quote unquote an authoritarian government, I sort of had things pretty much under control.
Right.
Okay. However, I was still subject to politics. What more when, post Marcos era, okay?
Right.
It's hard. The politics within Philippine sports has always been very hard. I've really noticed that. Okay, and this is what I have said to you, and I'll say to you again. This is what stops Philippine sports from flourishing.
Yeah.
Okay, and sana, I said this before, and I've said this many times. Okay, I've talked about this previously with national sports figures, and I'm saying it to you now, Pio. You just have to create a proper foundation and leave that foundation alone. The only problem is people implement the foundation. And then you have a problem with people because you have a problem with politics. Okay, which is really sayang.
Yeah. And they always say that the sports is, it's just a reflection and a mirror of the society wherein it exists. And
Absolutely.
We're just so politicized.
And this is why you look at countries like, you look at communist countries, look at China, Russia,
Cuba.
Cuba, yes, exactly, Cuba. You have discipline, okay? You have control. You don't have politics because they're communist countries, okay? And then you have the first world countries that have the systems that I'm talking about, which are not dependent on who's in power. So you have you have a proper foundation in the United States, a proper foundation in the United Kingdom, proper foundations in Australia. Okay, diba? And certain countries in Europe. This we don't have.
Right.
Okay, because whoever's president assigns people to run Philippine sport.
Right.
And it all becomes political.
Yes.
Okay, and it just keeps on repeating itself. It's so redundant. It goes round and round and round. And that was one of the reasons why I actually sort of went away from sport. Because being there, done that, you know, I know the solutions, and I've said it so many times, but it falls on deaf ears. I mean, people aren't listening. Okay. Yeah.
Can these issues be solved in a term of one president, sir?
Well, you know, you have to admit that under President Duterte, to a certain extent, you know, we did relatively well. Yeah. Okay, I mean, we won. We were the host, and we won the Southeast Asian Games. By the way, the difference between 2005 and the last Southeast Asian Games here was that
2019.
Yeah, we had double the sports. Right. Okay. There was double the sports, and because of that, there was far more medals at stake than during our time.
Right. So, and the 2018 Asian Games, we did well as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So, but you know, anyway, if you look back with hindsight and you look at all of our athletes, we really have had great athletes. Okay, and it's always the system that tends to bring the whole system down. It's just the system. It's not the talent. We have such good talent dito sa Filipinas. That's why I keep on saying you don't need, kasi it's much easier to go overseas and to look for genetically empowered athletes overseas. Yeah. Okay. It's much easier. You don't have to talent scout. You don't have to train athletes. You don't have to have a strong system here. You just look for talent overseas. That's all you do. And that's
you just look at Olympic trials, and then you see if they look Filipino, then maybe try to court them.
Exactly. So that's just. I'm sorry. That's just. That's not a very productive way of implementing a full-time sports program in your country. Okay.
It's like trying to win the lottery without doing any development.
Exactly. Exactly, Pio. Exactly. Yep.
What do you think of, this, I guess, a political question, but what do you think of what's happening with Obiena and the Pataka, sir?
I'm so busy that most of the time I'm not sure. But they were arguing about, what was they arguing about? About the sweldo or about the incentive or something?
Yeah, something about paying the coach.
I'm not sure. You tell me. Pio, you tell me. I'm not that sure.
Well, Patafa came out with a statement against Obiena, saying Obiena did not liquidate funds at the right time because, the coach approached the management of Patafa saying Obiena did not pay, but this was refuted by Obiena's coaches. So we don't know who's telling the truth. PSE wanted both sides to stay silent on the issue because it was going out in media.
But it came out on Facebook and it came out on television. And I saw that. Yeah.
And in Obiena's side, he was saying stuff like, these are millions of pesos, and why am I the one supposed to liquidate this? Why can't the NSA or the PSC pay our coaches directly? Why does the NSA have to give money to me, and then I have to pay my coach, get a receipt, have that receipt liquidated for co-op purposes? But basically,
well, I think it might be also because Obiena is not in the Philippines. That he's moving around. Okay, he's traveling around. So, syempre, if he then receives money, it's also incumbent upon him to liquidate it, diba? Yeah. But maybe, he's busy concentrating on performing. He's busy concentrating on traveling. So it's also hard for him to do that. So it's simply the way they're doing it. That's a problem.
Yeah. That's the argument being made.
And this is, I believe this is the first time that we've had an athlete, especially in athletics, traveling around, competing in various world championships around the world,
Mhm.
Parang we've never had that before. Okay. Before, during Gintong Alay, the team would go and compete in various championships. We would not compete in the Athletic European League. We would not do that. We never had an athlete good enough to do that. But Obiena is good enough to travel around and to compete in all of these competitions. That's never happened before. Okay, so I guess it's a problem of the system.
Yes.
So,
And I guess
but
if
it's
people,
sayang, because
yeah,
it's sayang, because Obiena is obviously really good. He's
yes,
hometown talent. He's really good. He's got a good foreign coach. I mean, he's world class.
right.
And he should not be subjected to that.
Mhm.
The NSA should work things out because
Right.
they should be proud that they have this guy who's,
Yeah.
imagine competing in all of these very sophisticated European athletic competitions, and you have a Filipino there. I mean,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. I mean, that never happened even during my time. Okay,
Wow.
so sayang.
That says something about the mettle of this kid. And yeah, there were news reports here 2 3 years ago that this kid would actually show up in Europe, and the cash hasn't been transferred to his bank account yet. So when he gets
Okay.
to a city, he gets to an airport, goes to an ATM, and I'm not sure if I'm remembering this correctly, even just from memory. He'd go to an ATM and check, oh, there's no funds. So how do I get to the hotel? So he'd just
Really?
bring his pole, start walking.
Really?
Yeah, and this was in the news somewhere. So
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And that's really a pity. And
yeah,
that just shows you about our system.
and well, but you know, um, to be fair, I guess in the past few years we've been doing quite well. I mean, from 2016 Rio Olympics, we had a silver medal. 2018 Asian Games, we did well. 2019, of course, on our home soil, and then 2022, the most successful Olympics in Philippine history. How do you
Yes.
think we can build up on all of this success?
Well, at the risk of being redundant, it's
Right.
creating a system, okay? And I say that over and over again because sports is as good as your system. People have to understand that athletes are not created overnight, even
Right.
though they try and do that by looking for athletes overseas, okay? You have to train athletes over a long period of time. Do you know that in 2005, Pio, we actually brought our fencers, the fencing team, to China, and they trained with the Chinese fencing team. Imagine our wrestling team, you know where we brought them? We brought them to Mongolia.
Okay.
Okay, and they trained with the Mongol wrestling team because the Mongols had such good wrestlers. Okay, so it's working out your system. If you can't train athletes at home, bring them overseas and have them train in certain specific areas. Work out the proper training system. It's
Right.
all training. Sports is all about long-term training. If you have long-term training, you will produce great athletes. But those great athletes must be part, once again, of the term system. Okay.
Right.
So if we can do that in the coming years, which I'm not sure we will. And the reason I say that is look at the forthcoming election. Look how magulo everything has become politically nationwide. Okay. I think that politics will trump everything. This is the problem with our country. Our country should not have elections every 3 years. This is a joke. Okay. The Philippines should have elections every 4 or 5 years. I believe we should have elections every 5 years because we all know what a political animal the Filipino is. Okay. And then you have it every 3 years. This is crazy. This disrupts society. Okay. And this is why with all the issues surrounding the national political scene now, I don't think that's going to be very good for Philippine sport. I think sport will really take a back seat because of the intensity of politics now. Okay, and then let's see what happens. Whoever comes to power, whoever is the next president, I'm not sure, but let's see. And you know, as I said before, it's always the system, and the system is always subject to the people in power. Okay.
Without getting the cart ahead of the horse, how would you do Gintong Alay differently under the current circumstances if you had to redo it the next 2 years or so?
To honestly tell you, Pio, I wouldn't do anything differently because I believe that we had a very good foolproof system that was simply compromised by politics. You know, Pio, people have to understand about me. I was an athlete all my life. I was born in Italy. I grew up in Europe. I then went to Australia. Later on, I went and lived in Thailand because my father was in Thailand working for the United Nations. And it was actually in Thailand that my sporting prowess came out. And as I said to you, I actually played Little League Baseball. The Americans who were at that time fighting the Vietnam War, okay, and all the American troops were in Thailand, okay. So the Americans put up a Little League and Pony League baseball system in Thailand. I played baseball. I was captain of the junior soccer team. I studied at a school called the Ruam Rudi School. Ruam Rudi was the only Catholic school in Bangkok. I studied there. I got into Thai boxing. I got into sport at a very early age. I later transferred to Australia, where I studied at St. Patrick's College. I played cricket. I played Australian rules football. I took up running. I also swam competitively at one time, okay, because I'm actually before I was a runner, I was a good swimmer, okay? Right. So I have played so many sports, okay? And as a runner, I really trained on my own, both in Ballarat and later when I transferred down to Melbourne. I lived in a country town called Hurstbridge, which was at the end of the northern suburbs line, and I would run on hills by myself. Okay, I would run up to 100. I would run up to 100 miles a week, which is approximately 140 kilometers a week. And this was when I was 15, 16, 17. Okay, I had a great love of sport, and because of that, I have a great understanding of the human body and how you use your human body to bring out the best, okay? And it all has to do with training, okay? You can have the innate talent. All great athletes have innate talent. Without that innate talent, they won't become Olympic medalists, gold medalists, national, international champions. You take that innate talent and you build upon it.
Right.
That's how you create champions. And when I was here in Ilocos Norte before, and I went all around looking at all the DepEd sponsored competitions, I saw so much talent. You know, even down south, there's a lot of talent. Even in the Cordilleras, there's a lot of talent. And I've seen it all. We have so much innate talent. It's just that the system fails it. And it's really sayang. You don't have to change Gintong Alay. It's the mindset, and that's the problem because the Philippines has a particular cultural mindset, okay? And we have a particular political system, which is a reflection of that mindset, okay? So that's the problem, Pio, okay? But for me, I felt that Gintong Alay and the formula that we created Gintong Alay because I had very good people, Tony Benson, and I had coaches from Oregon, and I had good people with me who really studied sports, and we really reached out to many different sports committees in different countries and worked with them. In fact, you know, Pio, that at one point, the Gintong Alay program in the Philippines, many Southeast Asian countries came to the Philippines and kept on asking me and kept on asking us about the Gintong Alay system. We had people come from Malaysia. We had people come from Singapore. We had even people come from Burma, which is now Myanmar. We had people come from Burma asking us about the system. And the most important thing for track and field was the altitude. Okay, when it comes to distance running, the most important thing is altitude. That's why all distance runners now, buong mundo, train in altitude. Okay.
Right. And I know that during the Gintong Alay program, there were also a lot of weightlifters. I mean, weightlifting was even ubiquitous.
Yes, weightlifting was relatively good at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. Heidi Lindias obviously stands out. Okay, she was special. Okay, she broke through the system now. Okay, but yeah, weightlifting was good, boxing was good, track and field was good. Our martial swimming was good.
Swimming was good.
What's her name? Who's the woman who is on? Excuse me, I'm just talking to somebody, Pio Sandalila.
Sure.
Who is the Christine Jacobs? You know Christine Jacobs?
Yes.
Christine Jacobs was my athlete.
Right.
Did you know that?
I did not.
Christine Jacobs was one of our top swimmers. And she won maraming gold medals in the SEA Games. Okay, and we had very good swimmers, okay? And we also had very good tennis players. And I forget the names. We had very good tennis players. If Gintong Alay had kept on going, Gintong Alay would have reaped tremendous benefit for Philippine sport. And it was the way everything was structured. And it was because, you know, you had good people who really understood sport. The problem in the Philippines is that you get politicians being placed in positions in sport. Okay. And you have politicians using sport for political purposes. Okay. And this is sayang because most of these people don't understand sport. Okay. They just use sports as a political vehicle.
Yes.
Okay. And that's really sayang. Okay. It's always important to have former sportsmen or sportswomen to run positions in sport because they understand. They understand what it means to be an athlete and what an athlete has to go through. So they understand the mentality of an athlete. But it's true. It's not always the best athlete that makes the best sports bureaucrat. Okay, it could be such as yourself, Pio. Because of your interest in sport, perhaps you would make a very good sports bureaucrat yourself. Do you think you'd make a good sports bureaucrat?
With a lot of guidance and good people, perhaps.
Correct. As we all need in all different aspects of life. When it comes to administering different aspects of life, it's always the people that make the difference. If people, you know, genuinely care about their field of interest and really have knowledge and background in that field of interest, then you'll have success in that particular field, in that particular specialty, you know, regardless of whether it's sports or whatever. Okay. So,
and during this Gintong Alay time, I keep on reading about the godfathers of sports. And this was partially
that was created by President Marcos. President Marcos sat down with me and we worked out a system of godfathers for each sport, which obviously the godfathers were businessmen, were big-time businessmen who had big businesses and could help to fund, could help to finance a particular sport, like Danding Kawanko handled basketball. Okay, we had different tycoons handling different sports. Okay, and that is also a good system. You know, where you assign a particular godfather to a sport, and that godfather helps to propagate the sport by infusing it with the needed revenue. That is also a good system.
And we're seeing this kind of with MVP Sports Foundation, Manny Pangilinan.
Yes, Manny Pangilinan has really contributed a great deal to Philippine sports. In fact, Manny Pangilinan and I talked before about setting up a Gintong Alay program before. We actually talked about it, but it never came to pass. Yeah. So I know Manny, and Manny has really contributed very, very well to Philippine sport. And we need more godfathers like that. But in the end, Pio, we need a national sports department, you know, that analyzes all the different components of Philippine sports and creates a foundation, you know, whether it's training, purchasing of equipment, infrastructure, talent scouting. You know, one of the things that's really not good in this country is talent scouting.
Yeah.
You know why? Because when it comes to talent scouting, you always have the bata-bata system. You always have people, you know, friends selecting relatives, friends selecting friends. You know, that's the system in the Philippines. And this is what I see that over and over again. Instead of having somebody that, you know, has a pristine eye and can look very clearly at people's talent, you can see somebody and they don't inject the bata-bata system, okay? If you have really top-class talent scouting, you will be able to create, you know, the next generation of athletes, because you'll have people who really understand the particular sport, let's say track and field or boxing, and these people are sent out and they move around the provinces and they attend all the various competitions and they really size up talent. They really look for talent because, as I said to you before, Pio, there is so much talent that just falls through the holes in the system, that falls by the wayside. And it's really sayang, because I have seen really exceptional athletes and wala na. Nothing happened. And you know, it's such a pity, because when you have good genetics, if you have somebody that has good genes and you can see really has the potential, if you can take them and subject them to an excellent sports system, you will have a world champion.
I was speaking with one of my friends here, and he was saying that, you know, Pio, unless the purchasing power of the average Filipino improves, it's going to be very difficult to build sports. Do you agree with that notion, sir?
Well, yeah, you know, the problem with the Philippines is the disparity in wealth, okay, in the Philippines. This affects all aspects of society. You know, I've been governor, I'm now the mayor of Lawag. You know, you know, Pio, this is actually one of something that I've concentrated on. I've concentrated on helping the indigent sector. And the reason I say this to you, Pio, is I'll share something with you. When I grew up in Australia, after boarding school, I went and lived with a family who were friends of my father. I subsequently had a falling out with the family, and I went out on my own. I was 17 years old, okay? Right. And I went out on my own, and I had no money, and I was nakakahiya, and I didn't tell my father, and I didn't tell my mother. My father was in Thailand at the time, My mother was vice governor of Ilocos Norte. I worked at a very young age. Okay. And so at a very young age, it was embedded in me. If I didn't work, I didn't eat.
Right.
Now, this is just between you and me.
Yeah.
Because of that, I feel that I'm a better public servant because I understand what it means for the common tao not to have money.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you don't have money, when you are on a subsistence level, working purely to feed yourself, you can't do anything else.
Yeah.
So if you have talent in a particular sphere, you can't bring out that talent because you're scrambling just to eat, just to make money, just to survive. So exactly. So your question about because of the economic system in the Philippines, yes, because the majority of Filipinos are poor, this really affects their ability to bring out their innate talent.
Right.
Okay, that's why in more developed societies, more economically developed societies, people are able to tap their inner potential much easier.
Right.
Okay, so it's true, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the economic system affects us and will obviously affect us when it comes to sport. It will affect us in most spheres of life anyway.
Quite profoundly. Yeah, I was really thinking, but the past few years, I think there's a lot of reason also to be optimistic about the trajectory of the country. It does feel like there's some progress, although, yeah, like you mentioned, there's still a lot of cultural traits that need to be unlearned.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we can do that, Pio, because it's something embedded within our culture. It's something embedded within the psyche of the Filipino. It's just a system the way it is. I mean, I was working on the national level in Gintong Alay. I'm all the way down here. I mean, I was a provincial board member before. I was also a counselor here in Loag. So I've really come down to the basic nitty-gritty level, and seen Philippine society for what it is on the most intrinsic level. And it's really a pity, okay? I won't talk too much about this, okay? But because we should stick to the sphere of sport. But it's really sayang. And this pandemic. Now let's talk about sport and the pandemic. The pandemic destroyed sport. Okay. When I was elected mayor, everyone was so excited here in Loag because they were saying, "Oh, now we can really develop sport. Now that you're the mayor, Mr. Michael Keon, you can really help us develop sport." And then bang, you had a worldwide pandemic, okay, which affected sports completely, okay, because everyone had to undergo isolation. There couldn't be social gatherings, etc., etc. Okay. Right. And that was sayang because I was already creating a sports program for Loag, okay, which could not be implemented. And because I was scrambling so hard to protect the people in Loag, everything we ended up by concentrating on all the health protocols, on vaccination. I'm very proud to be able to tell you that we've already reached herd immunity here in Loag, okay? And I was really helped nationally by the national government. Through Senator Bongo, I was able to talk directly to Secretary Galvez, who helped Loag City get huge amounts of vaccine, and we were able to rapidly reach herd immunity. And I'm very happy about that because on August 13, Loag City had 1,316 COVID positive cases. Today, we have 4. We have only
Incredible,
4
sir.
cases. We were able to really struggle and bring down because we had contact tracing. My nephew, Governor Matthew Marcos Manotoc, helped me with contact tracing. Contact tracing is very important. And with contact tracing, we were able to really subdue the spread of COVID in Lawag. And that has been really good. I've been really happy about that because it's all about saving lives.
Yes.
Okay. So, and then if we save enough lives and we can all move on, we can all create, an atmosphere and a climate where we can bring back sport in the future. So
I always think, this too shall pass. And
yes.
eventually things are gonna get back to normal or even better than what we knew as
well, hopefully, because they're talking about the Omicron variant, diba? But then they're saying that's, they then reassess it and saying it's not as bad as initially everybody thought. So let's see. People are talking about inevitably a 4th wave. I don't know.
Right.
We're
just gonna stay tuned.
Yes, and I would really like life to go back to normal because I'd really like to be able to really put together a nice sports program here in Lawag.
Right. And thinking nationally, sir, you're talking about Lawag, but what should be the role of the national government in, helping LGUs start the sports development? Should there be a national framework and then contextualized to the level of the LGU? How do you think it's supposed to happen?
Yes. Well, it's always been Department of Education that has put together all of the local competitions for the selection of athletes that eventually go to the Palarong Pambansa. And so you have provincial meets, then you have the regional meets, like here in Region 1, you have the IRAA, which is now the RIAA, which is the Region 1 athletic meet. And then you have all the various, diba? And then during my time, imagine there was even the Mindanao Games during our time, where our athletes would actually go to Mindanao and compete there. And actually, we would even dominate the Mindanao Games. Our athletes were so strong compared to the athletes from Mindanao, okay, at that time. And the national government, kasi this was also something that was important. Because of the disparity in wealth in our country, people have also used sports as a means to climb the economic ladder. That's why if people had talent, people could then be part of a training system that could help them overcome their impoverishment, okay, and help them climb the economic ladder through using their sports talent. And this is why sports should really be used as a means to economically empower people. Okay, if you can spend the money correctly by the National Sports Institute, the National Sports Commission, the Philippine Sports Commission, whatever, can work with the LGUs to create training camps, which is done through talent scouting, and then create provincial training camps that can bring up the talent in the provinces, and that they do that nationwide. That would help to raise people out of poverty, be able to train the local talent that's been properly identified, and then you create a pool of athletes, born Filipinas, that can be used, that can go up through the systems and be able to feed all the different national sports associations with all the talent. That's why you need to have a pool of talent. And that's why you need to have proper talent scouting. And that's why you need to have different training pools, different training, training pools in different LGUs, cities, municipalities, provinces. And these training pools then feed the national pool. Okay. But in order to do that, you really have to have very skilled people who are educated in sports development and who really have a love of sport. Okay. And will not, and that's why you need, as much as possible, a system that does not, that keeps politics at bay, that you keep out politics, okay, which is so hard to do in the Philippines, okay? And that's why it's so sayang, our political system. I always talk about that.
And I'm just thinking out loud, another purpose for sports really is, you know, in the past few years, we're seeing a lot of obese and overweight individuals. And these are even young children getting overweight, getting obese because of the lack of physical activity. And I look 10, 20 years ahead, you know, what's going to happen to our public health systems if, you know, at 30 years old, you know, people are, you know, struggling with cardiovascular disease or diabetes, for example.
Yes, and that's a very interesting observation, because it was made worse by the pandemic because all the kids were stuck at home and nobody was able to work out.
Right.
Okay. Right. And this is why people have put on weight. And you can see that. But you know, now, you know, we allow people to bike. We allow people to before, depending on whether it was ECQ or GCQ or whatever. No, it depended. We would always allow people to bike and to walk and to jog. And team sports was not allowed. But it's because of the pandemic forcing people to be sedentary that people have put on weight, and you can see that. But that has to do with the fast food industry. Okay, Pio, I'm sure you understand all of that. Okay, that's to do with the fast food industry. It's to do with the cultura, where people who come from the lower income bracket, they're able to get some money. So the first thing they will do is they'll go to McDo or they'll go to Jollibee, okay, because it becomes a status symbol, okay? But actually, it's the worst thing you can do, okay? And for example, I'm very conscious of diet. I've always been quite conscious of diet. At home, I don't eat white rice, I eat brown rice, okay? And I really watch what I eat. Now, for people on a subsistence level, they cannot do that. They just eat what they can eat.
Whatever.
Okay. Yes. And this is why, you know, you have to balance all of these various influences in our society. Okay. And that's why sports is also an antidote. Sports is an antidote to the culture of overeating. Okay. Which and I've noticed something about society. A lot of people eat to be happy.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to eat in order to make themselves physically strong and to give them the capacity to deal with everyday life. A lot of people eat because they have psychological problems. So people eat too much. And people use eating as a way of avoiding certain psychological complexes. And I've noticed that about people. Okay, I'm sure you have also, Pio, and how in modern society, people overeat.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and this is why sport acts as an antidote to that. So that's just my take.
So I think we're in the last few minutes of our interview, sir. What's next for you? I mean, what projects get you up in the morning these days?
Well, Pio, you know, I mean, you know, as the mayor of Lawag, I've concentrated fully on achieving herd immunity. it was incumbent upon me to protect our kailian, to protect our city mates. Okay, so all my energy went not just into the daily running of a city government, but the pandemic was something that really threatened, the fabric of society. So I really had to concentrate on that. And I believe that we've been relatively successful. And every day I just get up, I do certain things. I pray and I do certain things in the morning, and then I continue to work out. I continue to run a couple of times a week. I'm getting slower, okay, and I'm putting on weight because I sometimes drink with the capitanes. And I have to reach out to my barangay capitanes, especially with the coming election. So I'm campaigning, I'm reaching out to people, and now because things are more freer, we're moving around more. I'm moving around and studying the needs of all of the barangays and really attending. And I really work very closely with DSWD and CSWD. I'm working very closely with them because we're really, Asian swine fever was also a big problem in Lawag. We had to cull thousands of baboy, and this really affected the farmers. So we've also had to deal with that. The Asian swine fever became the COVID of the agricultural sector, okay? And this really affected, and this is what we're also working on. So I'm working with the farmers, with the farming sector, with the indigent sector, with many different sectors. So I have a lot on my plate, okay? Without having to think about sport.
Sir, thank you so much for your time. For me, I just feel like, coming from this talk, I now have so much ammunition in my head that in case I get to a point that I'll have to use it, then hopefully we create a strong system for sports wherever we're placed.
You should get involved in, Pio, where do you live? You live in Cebu?
I'm a Cebuano, sir. Yes.
Okay. But are you living in Cebu?
I'm living in Cebu.
In metropolitan Cebu?
Yes, Cebu City.
Or Cebu City. Why you can't get involved in the sports program of Cebu City? You can't get involved in the sports program of Cebu Province?
Who knows? But we've tried in the past, and we've really offered several times. We've done pro bono coaches education so many times. And
tell me, Pio, where did you study?
I came from the University of the Philippines, sports science.
From UP?
Yes.
So you studied in Diliman?
Yes, sir.
There you go, like me. We both studied in Diliman. Okay.
And at some point,
what did you take up in UP?
Sports science, and I'm doing my master's now in international health.
You're doing your master's in international health?
Yes.
Very good.
And at some point, we've helped several times in sports in Cebu, pro bono, coaches education, and the like. A few years back, and at some point they said, this is getting too political. I have better things to do with my time.
So you've seen the system up close when it comes to politics.
And for me, well, I guess it's just me, because I grew up here, and I knew everyone. I knew the people. They knew me. They knew what I was about. But after finishing my degree, I was looked at as an outsider. So
why?
Because I had a different education, and because of that education, I guess I had a different way of doing things, and I was a lot younger.
Did you ever live and study overseas?
No, I haven't. But I was Cebu.
Because your English is so good. I'm just curious.
Thank you, sir. But I was trained well by my grandparents. I lived with my grandparents.
Okay.
And I have quite a colorful sports history as well. I was a swimmer. And,
really? Okay.
I was under a Japanese coach at the age of 10. I was already getting up at 4 in the morning to train. and then I would
Okay.
go to school and then go back to training, which is quite normal.
Okay.
I think if you want to excel in sports,
Okay,
you
so
have to
you
be
understand
imbalanced.
that. Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
yes,
So you understand that. Okay.
yes. And I have a certification, an Australian Strength and Conditioning Association level 2 certification, which is the minimum if you want to work with an Olympian.
Okay.
Right. So,
Okay.
but now I'm doing this. I'm also a sports administrator for a Southwestern University based in Cebu.
Okay.
We also have our own business, Epic Performance and Fitness, where we provide solutions, fitness training, and the whole 9 yards, corporate fitness, and all of
You
that.
know, my son living in Australia, he's a fitness first trainer.
Wow.
My
Right.
son.
Yeah. Small world. Well,
Yes.
I love Melbourne. I wish I
Have you
could go
been?
back soon. I've been. It was our last trip before the pandemic.
I asked you if you so you hadn't lived overseas,
Yeah,
but
we
you've
just
traveled overseas.
we
You've
visited.
traveled.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So you went to
And
Melbourne.
I went to Melbourne. Got caught speeding in Melbourne.
Okay.
And
Yeah, they're very serious here. The police are very serious.
we
in
went
Melbourne.
4 kilometers per hour. Oh,
Where did you stay in Melbourne?
we stayed. Well, I forgot, but we went around the CBD.
Okay.
I was able to drive the Great Ocean Road.
Oh, really?
Had a
Okay.
good time.
Okay, very good.
I drove inside the CBD, sir, with all the hook turns.
Really? Okay. That's
Yeah, but
interesting.
it was a
That's
good trip.
interesting.
I love the place.
Okay.
Hope to be back. And
Okay.
well, about your question, getting into sports in Cebu, I've tried several times, and
Well,
it
it's
hasn't
Mahirap.
worked out. It hasn't worked out as well. And I tell people that the politics in our city is a little bit more difficult, and it's easier for me.
No, every city says that, Pio.
Yeah.
The politics is difficult everywhere.
But
Because
it's easier.
simply the cultura.
Yeah.
What?
But it has been easier for me, sir, to work with Ched, to work with DepEd. Yeah. It has been
not to work with the local government.
not to work with the local government for some reason, which I don't quite get.
Okay.
My grandfather was appointed mayor by President Marcos, also in Cebu.
Really?
This was in 1979.
So this was martial law.
This was
That
under
was
martial law.
So he
Yes.
was appointed mayor.
He was appointed mayor, and then he won the election, but he was
Okay.
told to run for assemblyman in '83, which he lost.
Okay. Which he lost.
Which he lost now.
Okay.
So we've well,
Okay, so
I've
you
never
also
been.
come from a political family, pala.
Well, not really, because my grandfather was just appointed Undersecretary of Health. So he
Okay.
was not exactly a he was a technocrat.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. Very good. Anyway, I'm glad I talked with you, Pio.
Likewise.
Okay. And you made me talk about something which is very dear to my heart, but it's something that I've not concentrated on. I've not been thinking of sport. I've been dealing with all these other things.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's been a nice respite. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your
Okay.
time. I've learned so much from you. Just stop recording.
Okay.